Okay, so let's continue. Onesh is very basic to Judaism, and therefore obviously we find it all over, definitely in Sefer Bereshit, but all over Tanakh. People do things wrong and people are punished for it. The question is, how do you know in your own life when something's a message, something is being told to you, and when do you assume, I can't know, I don't know what, that I need to do something else with this pain. And so it should be a good tool to use is the concept of the preciseness of statistical impossibility. That is to say, when it feels midah keneged midah, then you should think maybe this is midah keneged midah. But when it is not midah keneged midah, and things just seem off, then it's time to think about other things and not necessarily trying to figure out where the pain is, figure out which action we have done that caused this pain. So I'll give you an example. So someone told me a story a little while ago that they were on a trip to Israel, and they, more specifically, a seminary girl, obviously, she wanted to go to Sem. Start the story again. An 18-year-old girl really wanted to go to seminary in Israel, but she didn't have the money. And so her father decided they were going to have a sale of different things they have in their house, and to see if they can raise money for her to go to Israel for the year, to her to go to learn Torah Israel. And the money that was raised on that day, selling all the useless things they had in their house, came to the exact number that she needed to go to Israel to pay for tuition for the year. And that's like, it just feels like a tap on the shoulder. It feels like things are lining up perfectly. And if they are, maybe that's a message from Hashem. Another story is told of a certain grandfather who had the minhag to pay for all the children's bar mitzvahs. And sadly, the grandfather passed away a few months before the bar mitzvah, and his money was tied up in other places. And it wasn't possible for the funds from the grandfather to help make the bar mitzvah for the child. The father of the child goes out to buy a lottery ticket, as one does sometimes, and he wins. And he wins the exact amount of money that the grandfather had given to all the other children for the bar mitzvah. And again, you can brush off all these stories as coincidence of, maybe who cares? Maybe it's just good luck. But again, if we go back to what we said in the shiur last week, we're not trying to prove that God exists, that there is a force in the universe guiding everything. That's not what we're trying to prove. We're trying to feel confident that that force in the universe is good and just. And therefore, these stories are meaningful. If you're already at a stage of emunah where you say it makes a lot of sense that there's a creator to the world, and it makes a lot of sense that creator didn't just disappear, and it makes a lot of sense based on all of our history that creator is in touch with human beings and present. When one of these events happens, so you've got nothing to lose to say, sure, that's Hashgacha Pratis. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu reaching out to me and tapping me on the shoulder. Because we're not using these stories as the proof. We're using them as an expression, as a feeling of closeness, as a feeling of making these hypothetical ideas real in our lives. And this is I guess, on the positive side. On the other side, you can have on the negative side, a certain community rabbi that I may or may not know that told me the following story. He said that there was a certain situation in the community that he needed money to help a certain community member. And he asked one of the other congregants if they could help out, if they could lend a hand. Very wealthy fellow. And the man said, you know what? I'm sorry, I can't help you. the very next day, he gets a parking ticket for the exact sum that the rabbi had asked for. And so the congregant comes to the rabbi and says, I guess I really messed up. I guess I could have been better. And, I'm sorry, I apologize. And in the future, feel free to come to me. So there is a place, there's definitely a place for reflection that helps us move, that helps us improve our lives. Sometimes bad things happen, and we can use it as a springboard to do things better. So important not to lose sight of this concept, not to overdo it. You could take this really, really far. Tell a little personal story here. When I was 18, just before coming to yeshiva, I broke both my arms going down stairs on a bike. And so I remember some people asked me, what did you learn? What do you think that was all about? Why do you think that happened to you? So I think I answered at the time, I think it happened to me because I went down stairs on a bike. And obviously that's being real. That's I don't think it's worth overdoing this. I think if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is trying to send you a message, the message should be clear enough for you to see it. And if you can't understand the message, then maybe it wasn't a message at all. I heard Rabbi, in the name of Rabbi Blake from New York, once told over the story that, or really the analysis of, we'll talk about this a bit in the future, but why did the Shoah happen? Why did the Holocaust happen? And he said, there's supposed to be a clear message here, and there's supposed to be something that we can all relate to, all understand, why is it that two leading rabbis coming out from the same region come out with opposite reasons for the Holocaust? That is to say, if Hashem is trying to give a clear message that because of what X sin, something terrible is happening, how can it be that Rav Teichtal is saying the Holocaust happened because of a rejection of Zionism, and the Satmar Rebbe, Rav Yoelish, is saying it happened because of Zionism? How is it possible that if Hashem is trying to send us a clear message, you did X wrong, and therefore something terrible is happening to you, if the message is so unclear that two great rabbis of that generation come up with opposite reasons, then maybe the message just isn't clear enough. And maybe there's something else we're supposed to understand. And so it's so important to both listen for the messages, to look for the messages, but not to drive yourself crazy and insane. Right, the story is told of a certain girl whose husband died shortly after their wedding. Young girl, got married, and her husband died very shortly after the wedding. And she was broken and distraught. And she comes to the rabbi and she says, you know why this happened to me? Because I grew up not religious. And when I was younger, I did all these things that were not allowed. And I was with this boy and that boy and that boy. And clearly Hashem is punishing me in my relationship because I had forbidden relationships beforehand. And the rabbi, his mouth almost hits the floor. How can you say such things? Do you understand why these terrible things happened? Do you really think that that's midah keneged midah? Someone who grew up irreligious, that it wasn't their fault that they grew up in a world of values that that this is what was normal, this is what was considered, okay. How is it you really think Hashem is so cruel to take away your husband at an age because of that? You can take it too far and you can run into depression. And therefore this concept of midah keneged midah is true, but you just have to be so careful. And then the question is, okay, so some things that happen in the world, some terrible things that happen in the world are our fault. Okay, so what are the other possible reasons that something could happen? So when I'm faced with a situation where terrible things are happening, and I don't think I can say this is midah keneged midah, so why does it exist? Why is there pain in the world? Why is there suffering? And so the second possible reason that I'd like to discuss with you is simply free will. Right at the beginning of Sefer Bereshit, right? Bereshit Perek Aleph, Pasuk Bet. V'ha'aretz hayta tohu vavo, v'choshech al pnei tehom. The land was tohu vavo, and it was dark on the face of the deep. V'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. And the Spirit of Hashem was hovering over the waters. This concept of merachefet, hovering, also comes up in Sefer Dvarim. But I'll explain why I brought up the Pasuk in Bereshit in a second. Right, the Pasuk in Dvarim is, in Ha'azinu, Kneshe Ya'ir Kino al Gozalav Yirachef. Like an eagle, he awakens his young on the chicks, he flaps his wings. And Rashi explains that al gozalav yirachef, he flaps over the chicks. He does not make himself heavy upon them. Ela mechofef v'nogea ve'eino nogea. Rather, he hovers, touching and not touching. That is to say, the way Hashem made the world, v'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim, is that He is involved in the world and not involved in the world. So to speak, there is a value that Hashem ascribes to controlling everything. That Hashem says, on some things, I allow you to do what you want to do. Hashem doesn't smother us. Hashem doesn't control every single thing we do. We have free will, and free will is our ability to do good and to do terrible. With suffering, human suffering, suffering from humans, I don't think it's fair or logical to blame Hashem. Think about Cain. Who was Cain? Cain was an innocent person who had done nothing wrong. And along comes his brother Hevel and murders him. Now, can anyone think of a good reason why Hevel should be killed by Cain? Does it make any sense in the world? And yet Hashem allowed it to happen. And yet Hashem allowed Cain to kill Hevel. How does this make any sense? And the answer is simple. Hashem allows Cain to act in the world without controlling every single step he makes. And therefore, we can begin answering that sometimes we suffer for what we have done as individuals, and sometimes we suffer because someone else is evil and they do something terrible in the world. And that is not your fault at all. If we think about, Cain murdering Hevel, in the end, is there justice for Hevel? Does he ever see justice? Is his murder? Is his murder ever rectified? And so the Mefarshim actually go out there and explain two different possibilities. Number one, Hevel might have been reincarnated as Moshe. And Cain was reincarnated as Aaron. And unlike the brothers that fought and killed each other, here we have a rectification of what they did. The two brothers that look out for each other. And if Cain is Aaron, then there's a beautiful fulfillment of a brother seeing his brother succeed much more than he did, and yet standing by his side the whole way. But maybe more basically, we don't believe that there is justice in this world. Right? At the end of Pirkei Avot, Perek Bet that we read last week, right? When we say the famous phrase of Chazal, Schar mitzvah b'hai al maleka. The schar of a mitzvah doesn't exist in this world. Chazal are telling us black on white, don't expect the world to be just. Don't expect the world to be fair. And now I guess the question is, philosophically, why does Hashem make a world that could be so full of evil, that could be so full of pain? Why would Hashem want to do that? And the answer is that for some reason, we need to explain this more deeply, but for some reason, free will is so important that Hashem allows evildoers to carry out their plans, even though it's totally against his will. For some reason, free will is so important that Hashem takes a back seat sometimes and allows terrible things. And now the question is, why is free will so important? So I remember a few years ago, I heard a shiur from Rabbi Aaron, which I think he most clearly explained this idea to me in a way that I've carried in my pocket ever since. He said as follows: there are two people. One is good, was good, and always will be good. And another that struggles with his evil all the time and overcomes it. Who is a greater person? Who is a greater person? Someone who charges into battle knowing that they're going to survive because they're bulletproof and psychic? Or someone that goes into battle with the possibility of being killed, risking his life, charging in to save his friends? Who is greater? And I think we all agree that part of greatness comes with risk. There is no heroism, there is no achievement without the possibility of failure. And this is the reason that we have to have free will, that Hashem chooses to give us free will. Because from his perspective, there's no possibility of failure. Right? From our perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is this all-powerful being that can't fail. And therefore, he decides to create beings that struggle with themselves, that through their achievement, through their overcoming of the Yetzer Hara, they bring something into the world that never existed beforehand. That is the possibility of free will. What free will does is brings the option in of very good. Let me explain what I mean. The concept of ki tov, Hashem saw that it was good, comes up again and again in Perek Aleph of Bereshis. Vayal ki tov, Hashem's creating vayal ki tov, vayal ki tov. But finally, with the creation of man, the pasuk says vayal ki tov me'od. It was very good. What does it mean, very good? Chazal explain, very good is the Yetzer Hara. Surprising. How is it possible that the Yetzer Hara is the thing that makes things very good? I think according to what we've said, we can answer that. That through the possibility of evil comes something very good. The rejection of evil, the defeating of evil is what makes life very good. And therefore, evil has to exist in the world. Without evil, there would be no good. And therefore, ein hachanami. The innocent can suffer because people are bad sometimes. People fail to overcome their Yetzer Haras. And therefore, there can be evil in this world. The possibility is there was a tragedy in America a few years ago. A young assistant rabbi lost his wife in a car accident. They were all in the car together. and someone crashed into them, and the mother was killed. And as he's sitting shiva, people say it happened because the guy driving in the opposite lane was drunk. And he did a terrible thing, and therefore he signs off on the checks. HaKadosh Baruch Hu guarantees something to stand that what we did has caused us to suffer. I don't know if you've ever seen one of those YouTube videos or Facebook of instant karma. Right? Sometimes we instant, sometimes a little less instant, but sometimes when we do things wrong and other people do things wrong, there are consequences straight away. And then there is the evil of man. Man can be evil. There is free will in the world, and that can cause terrible suffering. Ultimately, on this suffering, and guarantees to right the wrongs of history. The question that leaves us now is, what about natural suffering? What about tsunamis? What about suffering that seems to be not the result of the evil of man? What about our current situation with the coronavirus, where so many tzaddikim have been taken from us? How do we understand the suffering that is natural and doesn't appear to be a punishment for anything that we have done? And so we're going to end here for this week. Any questions, feel free to message me. So that's where we're up to so far. Number one, suffering can happen because you've done something wrong, we've done something wrong. And number two, maybe terrible things are happening because man can be evil. And hopefully in the future, we're going to hopefully gain a glimpse and insight into why terrible things can happen in the natural world. I'll end with a story from Menachem Begin. You can see this on YouTube. Maybe I'll send a link out to the WhatsApp group afterwards. Begin was visiting the Kotel for the first time as prime minister, I believe. And someone comes over to him, grabs him by the arm, and says, "How can you believe in God after the Holocaust?" And Begin answers, "The only way we got through the Holocaust was with HaKadosh Baruch Hu." That is to say, I don't blame HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the Holocaust, but he is the reason that we survived it. Again, these are very difficult, very challenging topic. And the goal here isn't to give an answer. There's not one answer that's going to answer everything. The goal is to take piece by piece, take this perspective, that perspective. And then ultimately, after all of these different answers are given, we need to ask the question again, why in Eov does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say, why in Eov does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say, this is all beyond you, you can't understand it? If all these answers are out there, and they are out there, then why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu brush Eov off with, this is beyond your understanding? Okay, looking forward to next week. Please message me with any questions or feedback.